Hi! So I decided recently that I want to reread all of the Harry Potter books. I started reading them in November, I think. I went on a reading retreat in November, which was basically a load of bloggers in this really big house in Yorkshire, and it was amazing. And I decided to start reading them then. So I read The Philosopher's Stone in November, and I decided that I would reread one each month, and then I also thought that I would start talking about them on my channel, because why not? I'm a massive Harry Potter nerd, and I've never reviewed the books because I've read them. They're the kind of thing that you kind of read years ago, and I don't really think to like review them. So I thought it would be interesting to, as I reread them, to like share my thoughts about each book on my channel. So I'm going to start doing that. So Harry Potter is a bit of a funny one because it's so nostalgic. People love it, I think, almost purely for nostalgia. A lot of people read them as kids, or if we didn't read them as kids, we kind of grew up with the films. I think the first film came out, was it 2001? And that means that I would have been like 5 or 6 when the first film came out, and I remember seeing it. I especially remember seeing the second film in the cinema because I remember my sister had to leave the cinema when Ron is like chucking up slugs because she thought she was going to be sick. This is when we were like 7. So I remember that one, but I still kind of remember seeing the first one too. And it was funny because we just grew up with the films, and then it wasn't until a little bit later that I decided to start reading the books. And by later, I know a lot of people read them as kids, but I didn't start reading them until I was a teenager, I don't think. I don't know why, because we liked the films already. Like, I remember we loved the films when we were kids. There's a picture of me and my sister, if I can find it, I'll insert it on the screen, of the two of us playing on, we had a PlayStation 1 for, I think, our birthday from our uncle, and the first game that we played on it was The Philosopher's Stone. And it's just so funny. There's a picture of like tiny us both facing the TV playing The Philosopher's Stone on PS1. I mean, these books and films and games and everything just they've just brought so many memories, and I think that's why people now as adults love them so much, despite the author being trash. I'll quickly talk about that a second. If you don't know, J.K. Rowling has a few controversial opinions, and she's not afraid to share them. And she's kind of been in hot water a lot recently with opinions on like trans people, and yeah, she's just had some views that aren't very nice, and people have kind of been just cancelling her for it. They're just like, we don't like her anymore and we're not going to support the books. And it's been very weird because as someone who kind of grew up with Harry Potter, as a lot of people have, and the books and the films and just this whole kind of series mean a lot. I have a tattoo on my arm of a winged key with the Deathly Hallows symbol in the centre. Again, I'll put a picture on the screen here. I would show you, but it'll be upside down. Also, the Harry Potter books got me through university. I tell this story a lot, but I was pretty much ready to drop out of university in my first year because I was just not liking it. I didn't like where I was living. I didn't really have that many friends, and I was just not a fan of being there. So I was talking to my mum, and I was so ready to just be like, I don't want to do this course, I want to just do something else. One of the girls that I kind of started talking to just from Facebook is now one of my best friends, Beth. She and a couple of her friends decided to set up a Harry Potter society, and I was there, obviously, straight away. As a massive Harry Potter fan, I was like, oh my god, yes, I really want to come and I'll kind of help support this new society that you're starting. So I went along to this society that they set up, and through that, over the next 3 years of uni, I made so many friends. Like, all of my friends that I made in uni, I made through the Harry Potter Society, and it kind of, my love for Harry Potter while I was there just grew 100 times more than it was already. Like, I was kind of a casual fan before I started uni, and then when I kind of had all these friends that were massively into it, and we were meeting every week to discuss it and watch the films, and we watched films that the Harry Potter actors are also in, and we just played games and we had quizzes. And in the second year of uni I became the vice president of the society and head of Hufflepuff, and Harry Potter just kind of ended up taking over a lot of my university life, which I was just loving. And yeah, it just ended up being really important to me, and now it means a lot as something that is not only nostalgic, but as something that kind of shaped my time while I was in university and made me meet so many people that are now some of my best friends. And I'm just really grateful to it for kind of, it sounds cheesy, but improving my life in so many ways. So for people who can just kind of drop it instantly and say, oh, I'm not going to support it anymore because the author's trash, it's a little bit harder when it's kind of a big part of your life. And I know it sounds really kind of nerdy and pathetic saying that a book series is a massive part of your life, but it really has been kind of a really big part of a lot of points in my life, and I can't just drop it like that because it has been so important to me. So with all of that out the way, let's get to the first book in the series, The Philosopher's Stone. I read this, I was just going to say, I read this first out of any of the books. Of course I did, it's the first book, so dumb. I think I read this as a kind of early teenager maybe, and I remember really liking it. I had the really old illustrated covers. I don't have them anymore, which is sad. I kind of wish I kept them. But I remember reading The Philosopher's Stone and The Chamber of Secrets, and I don't think I ever got past that when I was a younger teenager now, until I was kind of older. Like when I was maybe an older teenager, I started reading from the beginning again, and I maybe read up to The Goblet of Fire, and I remember really loving The Goblet of Fire, and then again I kind of stopped reading them, and then I didn't read the rest of the series until I was in university, because it was that kind of pull from everyone else who kind of loved Harry Potter so much that made me want to finish reading all of the books. So it wasn't until I was in uni that I finally read all of the Harry Potter books. So the later books, it doesn't feel that long since I read them, even though it still has been a good few years since I read them, probably 5 years at least since I read them. It doesn't feel that long. However, with some of the earlier books, I feel like I read them years ago, but at the same time, I remember these ones the most because I've read them the most times. Like, I've reread the earlier books, so many times now because I kept meaning to kind of read the whole series, so I would go back to the beginning and start from The Philosopher's Stone and try and read the whole series, and then never get past the first few books because I'm awful at getting distracted, especially with reading long series. So yeah, The Philosopher's Stone, I don't even know if I need to say what it's about, do I? In case you're one of the people that doesn't know what Harry Potter is about, Harry Potter is about a wizard called Harry Potter, if you couldn't guess. His parents died when he was a baby, and he's kind of grown up with his really abusive aunt and uncle and his horrible bully cousin Dudley. And it's not until he's 11 years old that Hagrid, who is a big giant, comes to his house and tells him that he's a wizard, and he is kind of offended that his auntie and uncle have always told him that his parents died in a car crash, and his life has changed forever when Hagrid kind of takes him on his first journey to finding out that he is actually a wizard, and his parents were two of the most famous wizards because of how they died. And he goes to Hogwarts and he learns how to be a wizard, and that's what all of the books are about in a nutshell. The first book is definitely the most light-hearted book of the series. The books tend to get darker and darker as you get through, and I mean the Chamber of Secrets is still quite light-hearted, but I'll get to that when in my Chamber of Secrets video. I need to only talk about Philosopher's Stone. But yeah, this is the most light-hearted one of the series. It's just so much fun. Like when you're getting introduced to all of the characters that are going to be recurring characters for the rest of the series, and you're learning about the wizarding world and Hogwarts and all of the teachers and kind of the whole magic system, and you're learning about the school curriculum, and you're kind of learning about all of these things that set a really good foundation for the rest of the series. And it's just so much fun. Like, there's hardly any darkness in it yet. I think the darkest point is towards the end of the book when he meets Voldemort for the first time, and that kind of starts to set a darker tone for the rest of the series. But until then, that's kind of like the last couple of chapters of the book. Until then, you've got all of this light-hearted stuff with him learning how to play Quidditch, and he's kind of trying all of these wizard snacks on the train, and it's just kind of, I find it so fun to read because he is just learning so much about this world that he didn't know existed. And I think it's really useful for the reader as well to kind of see it through Harry's eyes, because Harry is seeing everything brand new, so he's kind of seeing everything for the first time, and it helps when we're also learning about the world for the first time. It kind of makes us feel like we're right there with Harry. We're at the same stage as he is, where we don't know anything about the wizarding world, exactly the same way that Harry doesn't know anything about the wizarding world, and we're all kind of learning together about this magical world, and it's just so much fun to follow him going into this world for the first time and just learning about all of the characters that we can kind of start to get an idea of who might be bad and good and who our favourite characters might be. One of my favourite characters from the beginning, I've always loved him since I was like a kid, is Hagrid. Hagrid, I think, is probably my number one favourite character of the entire series, and I kind of love that Hagrid is sort of like his guide throughout the whole series, especially in this. Hagrid is the one who comes to tell him about his life, he comes to tell him about his parents and that he's a wizard. He is the one who kind of takes him to Diagon Alley for the first time and buys all of his supplies. Every time he sees Harry around the school, he just kind of makes sure that he's okay. He's just like this really big, comforting dad figure that Harry never had. And until we get other people like Sirius and Lupin and people like that later on who also become kind of father figures for Harry, Hagrid, I think, is one of the first father figures that Harry has had, because obviously Vernon is definitely not. Like, he is, the Dursleys are just awful. They've never been kind of parenting figures for Harry. So I think for Harry, having Hagrid there as a big kind of comfort blanket for him helps him a lot through his first year. And like, of course, we see them going to Hagrid's house a lot, and they spend a lot of time kind of going to visit Hagrid's hut, and they just kind of sit there and talk to him, and Hagrid will let them just sit and talk to him, and he'll kind of help them give advice, and he'll just give them a hug when they need it. And I just love Hagrid so much. He's like such a good just base figure for the whole series. Like, none of it would have happened without Hagrid, and I just really love him as a character, especially later on. I'll get to that when I talk about the other books in future videos, but Hagrid is just a solid guy all the way through. He doesn't have a bad bone in his body, and I just love him so much. So if you've only seen the film, I would definitely suggest you read the book. So the films are, I really love the films. A lot of people don't like them at all because they do kind of take a lot of details away from the books and kind of strip them, but I grew up watching the films before I read the books, so I still have a massive soft spot for the films. I just love them so much. Like, I will happily watch all of the films so many times. I think I've watched The Philosopher's Stone approximately 400 times. I just really love it. It's just one of my go-to films when I'm feeling rubbish, or if I need cheering up, or if I just want a bit of nostalgia. I will always go back and watch the first film. They always feel surprisingly festive as well. I know Christmas is in the films for a little bit, but There's something about watching the Harry Potter films close to Christmas that makes me feel so festive. Does anyone else do that? Maybe it's because they're always shown on TV so much around Christmas, but I don't know. I just love them so much. They just give me like a heartwarming feeling. If you love the films but you haven't read the books yet, definitely read them, because one thing I love about the books is that they do have so many details that aren't in the films, and I know a lot of people will say that the films suck for that reason, but I kind of love that the films don't include some of the details from the books, because then the book is a completely different experience to the film. You can still enjoy both separately, but the book gives you so many details that when you read it, it kind of explains things that the films gloss over, and you get so many extra details that you didn't really think about. It's just so great. Like, you get so many descriptions of things that you just don't get in the film. So like, so many little examples. You've got things like, it actually shows you where the boats, you know, when they get on the boats at the beginning, once they get off the train and they get the boats across the river to the school, it actually kind of tells you where those boats go to and like where they've come from. And it's just little details that add so much that you don't even think would add a lot to the story, but it's just the tiny details just make it feel so fleshed out, and it makes it feel like J.K. Rowling has thought of everything. There's just so much packed into such a little book. It's really clever, because if you want to just kind of read it for fun, and if you're kind of maybe younger and you just kind of read it for fun to see what Harry gets up to, you can. But when you read it as an adult, you can also dive deeper into a lot of the details, and you can just really enjoy the fact that there are so many tiny little details that you might miss if you read it a first time. Like, I've read this so many times now, and even rereading it, I've just forgot so many of the little details that I really love about this book. I feel like films often don't do a good job of kind of fleshing out characters. Like, you don't get a lot of time to explore the characters a lot, and I think that's one downfall of the films, is that a lot of the characters don't have a lot of depth, and it means that people hate characters that in the book they're really great. So like, a lot of people don't like Hermione from the films because she's really whiny, but in the book she's just so great. Like, I really like Hermione in the books, and the same as Ginny. Like, Ginny I won't go into too much yet because she doesn't appear in this very much. Like, you only see her at the beginning briefly when the rest of the Weasleys are getting on the train, because she's still like 10. She's not old enough to go to Hogwarts yet, but she's another example of a character that they just kind of ruined in the films. They made her so bland. They kind of strip a lot of the characters of any of their personality. So one thing that's definitely worth reading the book for is the fact that you get really in-depth characters and you learn so much about them. And kind of Neville is another one of my favourite characters. Neville appears a lot more in the book too, which just makes me happy because I love him. I feel like I might do a video at some point about my most loved and most hated Harry Potter characters and why I love or hate them so much. If you're interested in that, please let me know, because I would love to make that and kind of explain in detail why I love or hate some of the characters in these books. But yeah, one thing I love about the books is that you do get such a kind of in-depth look at the characters, and you learn about their personalities, and you learn a little bit as it goes along about their kind of backstories and their family histories and things. And yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like this book so much, is because you learn so much more about the world and the characters that you might not get just from watching the film. So one thing that I kind of forget, and this is going to sound really weird, but one thing I kind of forget when writing about these books or kind of talking about them or whatever, is that they're fantasy. So let me explain. I kind of feel like, I know these books are fantasy, obviously, because it's about wizards, and they go to a wizarding school, and there are giants and unicorns and like monsters and all sorts. It's obviously fantasy. But one thing that I kind of feel like with these books is that everything feels very real, and it's really hard to explain. I've just been standing here for like a minute trying to think of how to explain what I'm on about, but I think it's because everything's done through the eyes of Harry, and it starts with, you kind of find out about his family and like his auntie and uncle, and you get this very kind of contemporary start to the novel. You kind of learn about how abusive his auntie and uncle are, and you know that his parents have died, but you're not sure how. And it kind of, there's this mysterious element where you've got people in cloaks, like Vernon Dursley is going to work, and you have all these people in cloaks standing around talking, and it feels more like a mystery rather than like fantasy at the beginning. And then I think because you're learning about, like, you're kind of reading through Harry's eyes about him discovering this world for the first time, it feels very real. It almost feels like it could actually happen. And I think that's maybe why people feel so invested in these books, is that somehow J.K. Rowling has managed to create this world that doesn't feel like a crazy fantasy world. Like, it's not like Lord of the Rings or anything that's kind of massively high fantasy. You know you're reading a fantasy. You get so invested in the characters and what they're going through and kind of the little details about the world that you almost forget that this world isn't real. Like, you forget that we're not living around wizards. And I don't know what it is about them, but J.K. Rowling just does such an amazing job at making this all feel like concrete and real. I think that's maybe why people just get so invested in it. It's hard to explain. Please tell me if you know what I mean, because I just find that really hard to explain. But one downfall about this book that I will say is that the conclusion kind of wraps up in like a few pages, and I find that in a lot of books that are aimed at children. You get all these details throughout the book and you're following this journey from kind of the start of the book to the end, but then as soon as you get to the last couple of chapters, the entire ending wraps up within a couple of chapters, and there's only like a few chapters at the end where Harry, Ron and Hermione like play the chess game, go through, find the key, get through the door, he sees Voldemort, tries to get the stone from Voldemort and like talks to him, and then tries to escape, and then he's in hospital and talking to Dumbledore and talks about the stone being destroyed, and then he gets better and they have the final feast, and then they get back on the train and go home, and that's all within a couple of chapters. It's overwhelming. Like, so much happens within a couple of chapters at the end. Let me just see. Chapter 16 is through the trapdoor, and that's where they go through and they play the chess game and things like that. And then chapter 17 is the man with two faces, and that's when he meets Voldemort. And I think that is the last chapter. Yeah, that's the last chapter. That's when it ends. There's 2 chapters. All of that I just explained happens in 2 chapters at the end of the book. It's a lot. It's a lot to happen just in like a few pages, like 20 pages or something, that everything happens. And I find that a lot in kids' books, and I don't know what it is about them that makes the story is so detailed throughout the whole book, but then the whole story is just concluded within 5 seconds. It's very strange. So that's one downfall that I will say for this book. So overall, The Philosopher's Stone is such a special book because I've read it so many times, and it's the first book that introduces you to this world, and it kind of, for me, it's the most nostalgic one of all of them. The earlier books are kind of the most nostalgic ones. I would probably rate it a solid 4 stars. It doesn't get 5 because it, like I said, the ending is super quick, and it also kind of feels like there's a lot of stuff introduced in this. She's kind of, you're introduced to the world, to the characters, to like Harry as a person, to kind of it alludes to him being special. It's kind of a really big foundation for the rest of the series. So you are introduced to a heck of a lot of stuff in this book, and that means that in such a short book, it's like 330 pages, you are introduced to so many things, and it kind of briefly covers a lot of things. And obviously that's fine because it's enough of a foundation to kind of learn enough Like, learn what you need to know about the world to be able to go into the next few books and pick up where it left off. But it does feel like some things are kind of glossed over a little bit, like some things you wish were explained in more detail, which they are explained in more detail later on, but it does make this feel like there's a lot packed into such a small book. So yeah, Philosopher's Stone, I give a solid 4 stars. I love it a lot, and reading this kind of ignited my love for the books again and made me so excited to carry on reading them. At this point, I've reread The Chamber of Secrets and The Prisoner of Azkaban, so this month I'm going to go on to The Goblet of Fire. I am going to be posting my reviews of each of the books once every 2 weeks, so this will be going up today, and then my Chamber of Secrets review will go up in 2 weeks' time, and it will carry on like that. So every 2 weeks I'll post another review of a Harry Potter book that I've reread. So let's have a chat in the comments about Harry Potter. Were you a big fan of it when you were a kid, or is it something that you were introduced to later in life? Or is it something that you've never really been interested in? In that case, why are you watching this video? Like I said, I have always loved it since I was a little kid, but the books were something that I didn't start properly reading until I was kind of a teenager, and then the later books I only read when I was in uni, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, let me know what you think of the first book, and just if you're a Harry Potter fan overall. I'd love to have a proper Harry Potter chat in the comments, and let me know what your house is. I really want to know how many people are a Hufflepuff like me, but if you're another house, then that's fine too, because Hufflepuffs love everybody. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to keep up with the rest of my Harry Potter reread reviews, then like I said, they'll be going up every 2 weeks. So click the subscribe button and you won't forget to watch the rest of them then, going up over the next couple of months. I also post other videos. If you haven't been to my channel before, I post other videos about books, mostly YA, and sometimes theatre too. So if you're interested in subscribing to another booktuber, then please do, that would be amazing. Give this video a like, and I will see you in a couple of weeks with another Harry Potter review, or I will see you on Tuesday with a new video. Bye! Oh, why do I look so tired? Probably because I've been up for like an hour. That might be why. I don't even know if the camera's straight. I'll have to do. I have such good production quality on this channel. So I read start again. My voice is going. Great. Just what I need.